Our subject for today's Marketer-in-Chief excerpt is none other than the 11th President, James Knox Polk. That's what the K stands for, just in case you were ever wondering. Like, that is where you get that kind of fun piece of trivia. You know, when you go to the bar and they've got that trivia there and they ask you not to use your phone, but everyone uses their phone now. So yeah, that's not as fun as it used to be 15 years ago. But anyway, Knox, James Knox Polk, is the person in question. He is the most important president you've never heard of. He served a 4-year term. He actually died not long after leaving office. Kind of a poor health guy. His health situation is something. Do not Google his health situation. It's a little gross. And you realize what medical care was in those days, kind of the 1840s, a mess. What we want to talk about, though, is James Polk was what I call the M&A president. Before anyone had really coined the term merger and acquisition, he was the person who had a plan and executed that plan through 4 very short years in office. In that time, if you look at a map of the United States before Polk and after Polk, it is dramatic. The size of the United States essentially doubled. James Polk had kind of 4 big things that I covered. There are a lot of domestic policy accomplishments, but I think the key things, 4 key things. One, about Texas. Although his predecessor, John Tyler, had kind of negotiated the annexation of Texas into the Union, it was Polk who kind of signed on the dotted line and made that happen. He could have slow-rolled that, but he didn't. He wanted to kind of push Mexico into war because what he really wanted was California. That was the big prize. There's a lot of room between the Louisiana Purchase and California, but everyone wanted California for a number of reasons, but that was kind of that coast-to-coast manifest destiny, that era was just obsessed with that. But California was the big prize. Gold was going to be discovered there maybe a couple of years after the war with Mexico. That does not seem like a coincidence to me. I'm surprised historians don't talk more about it. A couple of them do. But come on, did we not know that that gold would be discovered there? Was it any surprise that right before then we went to war with Mexico to basically extract that territory? That seems a little weird to me. It's always seemed weird to me. But remember, Texas, number 1, to go into California, number 2. Why California is important is on the West Coast. The way to get from California to New York, if you wanted to go there, you didn't hop in a plane and go 5.5 hours. You took, maybe you could take canals and railroads, maybe to St. Louis, maybe to Kansas City. Then you went either on a carriage or on a horse or on foot. It took forever. It was dangerous. It was very difficult to go. It was actually faster to take a boat and go around the Horn. They meant Cape Horn at the bottom tip of South America. If you've ever watched a nature program about the Antarctic Ocean, you do not want to take a boat down there. It is dangerous in the best of times, but it was still faster and safer than going across land. That is crazy to think about. Hey, it's still easier to go on a boat where the waves are like 20 feet high all the time and it's ice cold and dangerous than it is to take a caravan across the United States. Think about that for a second. So the third thing was the site for the future Panama Canal. When New Granada, President de Colombia, approached Polk about a treaty, he wrote into the treaty, made sure it was written in, that there was this guaranteed neutrality for this narrow strip of land at the isthmus. And that wasn't called Panama really at the time, but it was part of Colombia. That was a big deal in Roosevelt's era, by the way, the making of the Panama Canal. I would recommend David McCullough's The Path Between the Seas if you're really interested in the history of that area. But it was Polk who way back then decided this is going to be really, really important someday, even though we don't know exactly how to cut a canal like that yet. They sort of knew that it was coming, and it would be in the back half of the 19th century. The fourth thing is what I want to talk about, and it was the Oregon country. It was a part of land up kind of present-day Vancouver, Portland, Seattle, that area, where essentially the British and the Americans got to co-administer this area. It was a little weird. There were the Spaniards down by California, but they were out of the picture. The Russians were coming down from Alaska, but there were like 50 of those guys. No one was really thinking that Russia was a serious deal, but they had Alaska, so they were up north there. But it was this area between that 42nd and the 54th parallel. It's easier when you look at a map. But just imagine the entire present-day states of Oregon, Washington, and the province of British Columbia. Just think about that entire area as being one big mess of no one really knew where the boundaries were there, but everyone knew they sort of wanted it. So basically, it was, where do you draw that line? Where do you cut the British part from the American part? What would become Canada and what would become Washington, Oregon, part of modern-day Idaho and Montana as well. So I'm going to read a little excerpt here from 5440 or Fight, that section where basically the Americans were bluffing that they would invade and push the boundary all the way up to the 5440 line, which is basically well into present-day Canada, well north of that, to make sure that the British didn't get funny about pushing down into the nice deep water ports around present-day Seattle, which is really what they wanted. Kind of Vancouver Island and Seattle were kind of the big deals on how to negotiate that. So let me read you an excerpt from that part, 5440 or Fight. The details here are a bit easier if you simply look at a map. In the days before GPS, boundaries were often fuzzy descriptions, disconnected from reality on the ground. The Oregon country fit that category. Both the United States and Great Britain laid claim to the area. Polk wanted to settle those disputes so that he could continue westward expansion. It's what happened when British diplomats suggested the Columbia River rather than a straight line with the 49th parallel that proved Polk's negotiating skill. Polk bluffed. He led the British to believe, by not disavowing those who used the 5440 or Fight slogan, that the United States would occupy, also known as invade, everything up to the 5440 line of latitude, well north into modern-day Canada. Neither country truly wanted a third war in less than a century, but it was the Brits who backed off first, agreeing to Polk's original demand of the 49th parallel. Now here's kind of the funny part about that. Historians say, hey, how did you really negotiate when the 49th parallel, kind of what cuts Canada and the United States now, hey, you just settled on what you were happy with before. Here's the thing. The British were continuing to kind of put their thumb on the scales and push ever southward. The Columbia River would have basically cut off, put those modern-day ports of Seattle well into British territory, which would have become Canada. And Polk was smart enough to understand we need that west coast all the way down. So the negotiation was all about 49th parallel, but Vancouver Island, which kind of dips down in there when you look at a map, that would remain in Canada, but it left Seattle alone, which is the big deal. Canada got, Britain got the Vancouver port, the Americans got the Seattle port and kind of that area. Big, big deal in the future. Of course, all my friends in Seattle, would you rather be part of Canada? Maybe you would. Maybe you feel more Canadian than American some days. But that's why you're Americans and not Canadians, eh? Anyway, this chapter, it's a nice short one, but it kind of highlights a really key aspect of that. And there's plenty more on Polk. There are great sources in there. I really loved talking with some of the scholars who study James K. Polk's presidency in great detail. It's someone that you should get to know more. Pre-order your copy of Marketer in Chief so you don't miss it. It's on Amazon right now as an ebook and print book and audiobook coming soon as well. But you can pre-order it today, launching on July 4th.